The most powerful graphics card right now is the RTX 4090. However, you might not want to buy one even if you have the money. We're likely going to get a 5090 around January of 2025, which isn't all that long from now. So if it bothers you that you'd be paying $1,800 for a graphics card that might be completely eclipsed in performance at around the same price point in just a few months, maybe hold off, especially if you already have a decent gaming PC. You're just kind of getting that itch to upgrade. I would say try to hold off on that. Now, if you got a lot of money to throw at your hobby and you're like, I'll get a 4090 now, and if the 5090 is a lot better, I'll just get that then, and you've got that kind of money to throw around, okay, I'm not going to stop you. Get your 4090. It is more powerful than anything else on the market, especially if you're going for 4K gaming experiences with all the bells and whistles with ray tracing and all of that turned on. Now, if you wanted to go a step down from this, that leaves you with the 4080 Super as my recommended GPU. It comes in at $1,000. However, we're likely also getting a 5080 around January of next year, and while that is still just rumors, it's pretty solid at this point that that's likely happening. Also, we have some rumors about the performance targets for the 5080, which are rumored at targeting beating the 4090 by a little bit, which means that it would likely be something like 30 to 40% faster than a 4080 Super if the rumors are to be believed, which means that if you hold off a few months and if the 5080 comes in around the $1,000 price point, you'll be able to get maybe a 40% more performance per dollar in a few months. So once again, if you already have a good PC, you might want to hold off and do that. If any of you guys are wondering, wait, should I get the 7900 XTX instead? From AMD, I don't think so. It's coming in at $900 on the lowest price models and goes up from there, versus the 4080 Super, which isn't that much more money. We're talking $60 more if we're comparing lowest price models. At this price tier, $60 isn't really a lot of savings, and the 4080 Super offers a much better feature set. It has a lot of ray tracing performance. It has a better upscaler if you're gaming on a 4K screen. That really might come in handy. And the 7900 XTX occasionally does have a slightly faster rasterized performance, but we're talking a few percent. It's not going to completely change your gaming experience when you're not ray tracing, whereas the 4080 Super will completely change your gaming experience if you are ray tracing or using more aggressive upscaling settings. So I would definitely not save the money on the 7900 XTX, and I think 16 gigabytes of VRAM is fine for current gaming situations, so I'm not concerned about that on the 4080 Super. Now, if we're going down a step from here, we hit the 4070 Ti Super, which is around $800, sometimes like $10 less on the lowest price models. Now, is it worth saving money to go with the 4070 Ti Super instead of the 4080 Super? I actually think there's a pretty good argument for that. You still have the 16 gigabytes of VRAM, so you're not running the VRAM issues you get potential concerns for when we go below this point in the NVIDIA product stack. We also have enough ray tracing performance that on a 1440p display, especially rather than if you're trying to go 4K resolution, but on a 1440p display, DLSS quality plus frame generation, kick on a bunch of heavy ray tracing features, and you're actually getting a pretty good experience. You don't have to worry about the ray tracing and frame generation pushing past a 12 gigabyte VRAM buffer. So that could make some sense, but you should then also be considering the fact that the 4070 Super non-TI comes in at $200 less. Now we're at the $600 price point, but we do drop to 12 gigabytes of VRAM, and we do drop some performance. Not a massive amount of performance, but enough that you might have a harder time with those heavy ray tracing experiences, especially because they use a lot of VRAM, and frame generation also uses more VRAM, and we're right at that 12 gigabyte line here. So the 4070 Super is pretty borderline on whether that ray tracing and upscaling and frame generation feature set is really a big selling point, but I think in just raw performance per dollar, it is offering a better deal than the 4070 Ti Super. But again, you are taking some compromises on some of those big experiences, so you have to think about that pretty hard. I do have a whole video comparing the two GPUs. Now, in between the 4070 Super and the 4070 Ti Super, we have AMD's 7900 XT, the non-X version, coming in at a little under $700 right now, so kind of just splitting the difference between those. Now, is it worth considering the 7900 XT? It has 20 gigabytes of VRAM, so VRAM is not an issue, but you don't have those heavy ray tracing experiences, which arguably the NVIDIA competition can enable a playable experience with those. So if you're going to be sold on that, you might not want to go with the 7900 XT route. It can have a bit more rasterized performance than the 4070 4070 Ti Super for $100 less, and it is definitely better at rasterized performance than the 4070 non-Ti Super, but at $100 more. So it's kind of in a weird spot. So I guess I would say the 7900 XT could be the best GPU at $700, splitting the $600 and $800 recommendations, but only if you're not sold on those heavy ray tracing experiences. If those aren't a big deal for you, then maybe the 7900 XT makes some sense at this price class. It's just a lot of money for a GPU that can't quite enable those premium experiences. So it's not going to get a hearty recommendation from me, but just for your use case, it might be the best choice. Now, as we start to go below the $600 price point, now I actually think AMD is going to start to make a lot of sense, because they come in with cards like the 7900 GRE, which at $530 for the lowest price models pretty much matches or sometimes beats the rasterized performance of a 4070 Super, which is $600. You know, to get a little bit of a discount, you still get 16 gigabytes of VRAM instead of 12, which is nice to have. Although at the at the 1440p resolution, I'm not overly concerned about 12 gigabytes of VRAM, but certainly 16 gigabytes is nicer to have. But again, in the heavier ray tracing workloads, that 4070 Super will come out ahead. And we are at performance tiers where at 1440p resolution, you might often want to use quality level upscaling in a lot of the newest games. And if you're going to do that, there is that image quality advantage for DLSS. So are you saving quite enough money for the 7900 GRE to be worth it over the 4070 Super? I don't know. But also the 4070 Super does cost more money. So if you just can't go up to $600, the 7900 GRE starts to make some sense, because it's actually priced closer to the 4070 non-Super, which comes in at $520 on the lowest price, but then we're up at $540, $545, so they're pretty closely priced. However, I really don't like the 4070 versus the 4070 Super. I'd really rather have the Super version personally. And if we're starting to go around this performance class, if we're talking 4070, 7900 GRE, there's also the 7800 XT coming in at $470, but actually the 6800 XT, at least in the United States, I can get this card for $430. And so actually, if I'm going below the $600 price point, the standout for me is currently the 6800 XT at $430, because you're getting very close to that 4070 level of performance when you're not heavily ray tracing. And the 4070 is not exactly a ray tracing powerhouse. You're also getting the 16 gigabytes of VRAM, and you're coming in at $430. So actually for me, if we're going below $600, it's the 6800 XT weight down at $430 that makes the most sense to me. It's directly priced against the 4060 Ti, the 4060 Ti 16 gigabyte, which also costs $430 and up. And they're both 16 gigabyte cards, but the 6800 XT is a lot more powerful. The 4060 Ti is not at a class where I think ray tracing performance is a big selling point. I'd rather be turning down graphics settings for more performance. And speaking of performance, yeah, DLSS is a performance boosting feature, but 6800 XT just has more raw power. So oftentimes it'll be around the same power without using upscaling as the 4060 Ti would get using something like quality level upscaling. So I would definitely be more sold on that raw power of the 6800 XT, although there is a big power draw differential there. So if you have a lower end power supply, or you're just concerned about, you know, heat and noise in your room and all of that, yeah, I mean, you can definitely factor those in. But I would give the 6800 XT my recommendation as the best GPU under $600 currently, at least best value. Now, if we are around this $430 price point, what if we wanted to go below that? Well, you know, you have the 7700 XT from AMD at $390, which is a 12 gigabyte card and is noticeably less powerful than a 6800 XT. So I'm not really sold on that. I'd rather spend the $430, just a little bit more, and get that 6800 XT. And from NVIDIA, if we go any lower, we're now onto the 4060 Ti 8 gigabyte cards, which come in at $372, $375, $380. So right around there, where they're only 8 gigabyte cards, they and just really just not a massive amount of performance. So again, I'd really kind of rather get that 6800 XT if we could stretch to it. And even the 7700 XT offers 12 gigabytes of VRAM and a lot more performance at the same price point. And again, I'm not real sold on the ray tracing feature set at this point. And oftentimes, even using DLSS quality, the 4060 Ti is only catching up to the performance of a 7700 XT that's not using upscaling. So just keep that in mind. I'm not real sold on NVIDIA's 4060 Ti cards. They're overpriced and underperformant. Now, if we go below this point, though, I think we're getting around the $300 price point where there's a lot of competition. NVIDIA has the 4060 non-Ti, which comes in around $285, $293, $295, so right around that $300 price point and a little bit below. AMD's current gen offering is the 7600 XT, which is a 16 gigabyte card, which is kind of nice. The 4060 is only 8, but coming in at 310, 315, 320, and not actually being much more powerful than a 4060, oftentimes less powerful, you know, it's hard to spend more on a roughly equivalently performant AMD product as long as you use settings that stay within the 8 gigabyte VRAM buffer, which at 1080p is usually just means high settings instead of ultra or something like that. So I'm not real sold on that. However, AMD's previous generation 6750 XT is still available, at least in the United States, at $299.99. So at $300, you get 12 gigabytes of VRAM. You get more performance than a 7600 XT and more performance than a 4060, at least when you're not ray tracing. I'm not real sold on the ray tracing performance at this performance tier, and especially if we're targeting 1080p displays at this price class, then I'd be wanting to avoid upscaling if possible, because at lower rendering resolutions, upscaling looks a lot worse, even for DLSS. Now, DLSS has a better image quality advantage versus FSR, the lower your rendering resolution goes, but the 6750 XT has enough power that, you know, if we're talking 1080p gaming here, you can probably avoid upscaling quite a bit at reasonable graphics settings. 12 gigabytes of VRAM can let you max out texture settings and things like that the 4060 might not. It does draw more power, so and again, it's something else to consider if you're on a super low-end power supply or, you know, just going for a super efficient build or something like that. But at the $300 price point, I would give my recommendation to the 6750 XT. If we go below this price point, it gets a little hard to recommend things. Cards like the 7600 non-XT are available at $250, but you know, you're back to 8 gigabytes of VRAM. The 4060 is not that much more expensive and is also 8 gigabytes and has a better feature set. And I already said I'd rather not buy the 4060. I'd really rather spend that $50 more if you could do it and get that 6750 XT. It's just a much better product. Sometimes the previous generation 6650 XT offers good deals here, but currently I'm seeing 235, 240, 250. It's not, I've seen it as low as 200 to 220, which is where it's a much more standout value. So I'm not really sold on that right now. Same thing with the 6600 XT. It's around that $240 price point, so it's not really standing out to me. NVIDIA offers like the 3050, which would go way down to like 165 if you buy the 6 gigabyte model, but it is extremely low on performance. The 8 gigabyte model is also not very powerful, and that's coming in at 175. And if we're going that low in price, I'd probably get the 6600 non-XT from AMD, which comes in at $180. So around the same price as the 3050 and offers significantly more performance. I'm not concerned about ray tracing at this performance class. You should be turning those settings down in order to get more performance. And again, the 6600 offers enough performance that we might not need to rely on upscaling if we use like medium graphic settings at 1080p or something like that, which would be my preferred way to go at this kind of performance class anyway. Now, I will say that Intel does offer some interesting options in this price point. You have the A750 at $190. Now, if you were going to go the Intel route, just be aware that while their drivers have gotten significantly better, there's still been some teething issues on new game launches, not always working ideally out of the box on day one. Also, you want to make sure that your system supports ResizeBAR, which if you're upgrading on an older platform might not be the case. Intel GPUs don't work properly without ResizeBAR support. So I would really say that personally I'd go the 6600 route to get a more consistent experience and a similar performance tier. So that's my overall thoughts on that. All right, so we have recommended a gaming graphics card at every price point on the market. If we want to summarize super quickly, if you're buying the best GPU under $200, the RX 6600 from AMD makes a whole lot of sense. Going up from here, there's not a lot of good value until you hit the $300 price point, where the 6750 XT at $300 offers, I think, the best overall value. Going up from here, I think the next standout is the 6800 XT at about $430, beating all of the competition at its direct price point and competing super well with GPUs all the way up past the $500 price point. So the next GPU that I think might be noticeably better would be the 4070 Super, where you start to get into arguably usable ray tracing stuff on those heavier ray tracing settings if you're relying on DLSS and things like that. But that's where I think NVIDIA starts to make a little more sense, is with the 4070 Super, although again, it's not super compelling on those heavy ray tracing experiences, so you might want to make that judgment call if just saving a bunch of money and going with the 6800 XT still might make more sense. The 4070 Super is better, but is it enough better to justify the extra like $150 on the price? Something to still consider thinking about. Above this point, again, if you're not super sold on the ray tracing stuff, then the 7900 XT is the most powerful graphics card, around $700. But again, only if you're not super sold on those heavy ray tracing features, which might be accessible in a similar price point. Speaking of which, you could go up to the 4070 Ti Super at around $800, where you finally get back to 16 gigabytes of VRAM for NVIDIA. You get a lot of ray tracing performance for 1440p, DLSS quality, frame generation, kick on those ray tracing settings, and you usually have a pretty good experience. And again, you get all the VRAM you need to enable those experiences. If you're going past this point, though, I would really consider whether you could wait until around January of next year to buy a 5080 if it's around the $1,000 price point. We'll have to see. Because, yeah, I think you might regret it. But if you were going to buy around $1,000, again, big asterisks on that. But if you are, the 4080 Super is the way to go. The 7900 XTX isn't enough less expensive to justify buying it over the 4080 Super. And then if you just want the most powerful thing available right now, definitely get the 4090, except for the fact that at around this price point, we might have a 5090 that's significantly more powerful, or you may be able to, in January, right? Or you could end up getting around this performance level from a 5080 for possibly a lot less money. Now, we don't know NVIDIA's actual pricing plans or performance plans. This is all leaks and rumors, or even launch dates. But anyway, I would just consider holding off on the super high end right now, but we'll have to see what happens. Now, hopefully you guys found this video useful and or interesting. Today's video is brought to you by my channel members who've clicked the join button down below to directly support the channel financially. Huge thank you to those of you who have done that. So if you find value in what I do here, want to throw a few bucks a month to support it, a huge thank you. Totally understand if you can't. There's a few perks available if you want to check out click the join button. You're not locked in. You can see what the what the perks are and whatnot. But anyway, a huge thank you to just viewers, commenters, subscribers, everybody. I totally get not everybody has money to throw around at random YouTubers, so it's totally fine. And I hope all of you have an excellent day.